Hello, everyone. Although Germany and the Soviet Union cooperated between the two wars, relations soured once the Nazis gained power. Hitler's goal to conquer the East and populate it with German settlers was known to the public. The 1936 signing of the Anti-Comintern Pact made things very clear, but this was followed by the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in August 1939, which restored cordial relations. Right after the fall of Poland, Hitler returned to the question of conquering the Soviet Union, but the Allies had to be dealt with first. Stalin provided enough raw materials and energy to maintain the German war machine. France fell in June 1940, and the map of Europe was redrawn in the next few months, with more countries joining the Tripartite Pact, which even the Soviet Union contemplated briefly. Already in May, during the French campaign, Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, submitted a secret memorandum regarding the non-German population in the East. A month later, Hitler told his generals that his hands were finally freed, so the showdown with the Soviets would be the next step. Early planning was done by General Erich Marx. His Operation Draft East pointed at the Arkhangelsk-Astrakhan line as the primary target. The Red Army would be defeated in 9 to 17 weeks before the winter, after which most of the Soviet resources and population would be controlled by Germany, while other industrial centers to the east would be bombed and destroyed by the Luftwaffe. The border between the German Reich and what was left of the Soviet Union would be far to the east, so enemy bombers would no longer threaten the core German territories. This was the A2A plan, or the Marx plan, but it was just a preliminary study. Work continued on the specific details. Hitler believed that Germany would greatly benefit from the occupation of the European portion of the Soviet Union, which was rich in natural resources like oil, and also offered fertile lands and large industrial capacity. Entire divisions could be demobilized, the labor shortage could finally be handled, and Britain would certainly sue for peace, as it could not possibly defeat such a continental empire. Following Himmler's memorandum, a Generalplan Ost was submitted by Dr. Hans Ehrlich and Dr. Konrad Meyer. They relied on previous documents like the Ostforschung, a study of eastern lands where Germans lived together with other peoples. At that time, Himmler predicted the disappearance of 20 to 30 million Slavs and Jews through military action and starvation. They would be replaced by 10 million German settlers, but other groups, like Czechs and Latvians, would also be moved there to ensure proper population density. Later on, as the final solution took shape, the Jewish question was removed from this document, while other revisions added further details. In December 1940, Operation Otto outlined the details of the Soviet campaign. Hitler issued a directive in which he instructed the Wehrmacht to deal with Soviet Russia in a quick campaign with 100 divisions in two army groups, while Finland would tie down as many Soviet units as possible, and Romania would be defended by a mixed German-Romanian force. The Luftwaffe would destroy the Soviet Air Force and support the ground units in their advance. The plan was renamed Operation Barbarossa in honor of Friedrich I of the Holy Roman Empire, a leader of the Third Crusade in the 12th century, but more revisions were made, increasing the number of divisions to more than 150. Strong resistance by ordinary Red Army soldiers was expected, but their leadership was considered weak and disorganized. Stalin's Great Purge in the late 1930s did eliminate many talented and experienced officers. They were replaced by party men or lower-ranking candidates who lacked the proper education and experience to lead larger units. The Winter War of 1939-40 against Finland did show weakness, but the Soviets learned a lot from this conflict, and they were in the process of reorganization, which included the restoration of traditional ranks and the development of modern weapons and proper tactics. Already in 1940, Several high-ranking German officials warned that the occupation of these eastern territories would be an economic drag unless its industry was captured intact with minimal losses. Others claimed that the Soviet Union was weak, it did not pose a real threat to Germany, so maintaining ties with Stalin's regime would be more beneficial, relying on their large shipments of raw materials. Friedrich Paulus, future leader of Sixth Army, who would lose the Battle of Stalingrad, was also not in favor of the plan. He believed that no huge benefit could be obtained by occupation and subjugation, but Hitler stuck to his ideology and pushed aside all objections. In March 1941, the Barbarossa Decree was issued. It emphasized that the coming conflict would be a war of annihilation and extermination. Violence against enemy civilians was now permitted, all suspected partisans could be shot, crimes against humanity would not be punished. The reception was mixed. Some generals accepted the decree without any objections, while others tried to ignore it. In the same month, Hermann Göring's Oldenburg Plan outlined the seizure of all raw materials and industrial enterprises between the Vistula River and the Ural Mountains. All valuable equipment was to be shipped to Germany, while the rest was to be destroyed, turning the eastern territories into an agricultural region that would feed Germany. A hunger plan was also added, according to which by 1942 all German forces would be supplied with local food, neglecting the needs of the local population, which would be gradually starved to death. Nazi ideologue Alfred Rosenberg proposed the creation of several Reichskommissariats that would divide the conquered territory into smaller administrative regions. One would handle the Baltic countries and Belarus, another would include Ukraine all the way to the Volga, while one would rule over the Caucasus and southern Russia, one would be centered around Moscow, and the last would administer the Central Asian republics. Hitler wanted Leningrad, the Donbass, and Moscow in that order, but several of his generals, like Hans Guderian, believed that Moscow should be the primary target, where large concentrations of the Red Army could be encircled and destroyed. German forces started to amass near the Soviet border in early 1941. Aerial reconnaissance was expanded. The Soviets were alarmed by this, but Stalin was confident that Hitler would not attack in that year, while the Germans explained that they are stationing large forces there in order to avoid suffering heavy losses due to British bombing. Neither side had any illusions, though. Marshal Semyon Timoshenko described Nazi Germany as the main opponent, while Red Army Chief of Staff Boris Shaposhnikov predicted that the German attack would take place in 3 prongs, which is what happened in the end, as Operation Barbarossa was expanded to include 3 army groups. As a diversion, German troop movements and naval action was kept up near the British Isles, while most resources were poured into the coming campaign in the east. Overall, 153 divisions were near the border, including 19 Panzer and 15 motorized infantry divisions, with 4 divisions in Finland and 2 in reserve, along with 9 security divisions to guard the occupied lands. More than 3 million soldiers were waiting for the green light. They had more than 6,000 armored vehicles, 4,000 airplanes, 600,000 motor vehicles, and 700,000 horses. Finland offered 14 divisions, Romania had 13 divisions and 8 brigades for the attack, but the other Allied nations were not informed. The primary targets were Leningrad, Moscow, and the Volga River, while the Einsatzgruppen units had to eliminate all suspected partisans. I will talk about the actual invasion in future episodes. Thank you for watching. See you next time.